think is it still red light? Is that what you want? No, you're good to go. All right. Good evening. My name is Peter Orford. I'm the president of the Gungahlin Community Council. Welcome to the December meeting of the Community Council. Unfortunately, our agenda is a little shorter than we had hoped. Our second speaker from ACT Parents and Citizens Association was unable to attend due to illness, but we have an incredible hospital from the ACT Fire Service, and we hope to have Alice later on this evening. Without further ado, I think Greg's all wired up and ready to go. Greg is going to give us a bit of an overview of what we need to do to be more bushfire awareness. Greg.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Is your system picking me up? Don't know? Okay, look, thanks for the opportunity. So I was told the sort of things you'd be interested in tonight were preparing your personal bushfire plan, do you stay or do you go, preparing your home, making your house safer, bushfire alert levels, emergency contacts, a couple of other things. Does that sound like the sort of thing you're interested in? Okay. How I thought we'd do it is I'll hand out some really concise, brief bushfire survival plans. I'll just then tell you where I'm from, my background, and we might actually just work through the plans, just so that you're actually taking something away that's valid, it's got all sorts of information sources on, and rather than me just talking, most of what I'm saying just going out of your head will actually be, you can take it home as a bit of a cheat sheet and hopefully talk it over with your family. Sound okay? Great. All right, well, we'll launch into that. If you don't mind just passing these around and opening them up, and we'll actually work on that. So, do all of you understand who's who in the sort of fire and emergency field in the ACT at all? No? Okay, great. Hello, camera. Am I on screen? Excellent. So you can't beat a bit of distance between the audience. Just keep a step back and I'll end up in some virtual void. So within the ACT, we've got a tremendous advantage compared to other jurisdictions. Here in the ACT, we've got the overall emergency service agency, which combines the 4 normal agencies that deal with emergencies, fire response, whatever. So within that, we've got the ambulance service, we've got the state emergency service. Here, of course, we're a territory. We've got ACT Fire and Rescue, and we've got the ACT Rural Fire Service. Now, they've each got their different bits of legislation that they operate under, but we've got the tremendous advantage. We work under one commissioner in one headquarters building and share lots of our resources and operational staff. So when incidents happen either cross jurisdiction or whatever, we can support the other agencies and we can work together much closer than some of the other states and surrounding us. So we actually work out, our headquarters are at Fairburn near the airport, and we've got some tremendous advantages compared to other emergency organisations elsewhere. When somebody calls 000 in the territory, it goes first off to the Belconnen police, and if it's a police call, they actually deal with it there in their communication centre. Any other calls go to our Fairburn 000 centre, and then it's ambulance or fire. So that communication centre is staffed 24 hours a day. In the territory, we've got for incidents and emergencies, we've got what's called a computer-aided dispatch system. So when you call up, your phone position's plotted, your details come up, and the staff there create an incident for you, and depending on the type of incident, resources that are what we call stood up and available, whether it's ambulance, fire, whatever, they're live on the system, and the programming behind the computer-aided dispatch system automatically selects the most appropriate resource for the emergency or job that you've got. So that happens automatically. People are actually looking at the system to make sure that's enough, to make sure the response is actually happening. So that's actually followed up. But that's actually generated quite quickly by that computer-aided dispatch system. So that gives you a little bit of a background. Does that make sense? And that's the same whether it's for police use the same sort of system as well. So it's all map-based electronic, so it's nothing to do with pens and paper, whatever. They can see immediately where you are or where the incident is, where the other resources are. They can see, you know, possible problems of access or whatever. Inside of the unit, whether it's fire, ambulance, SES, we've got mobile data terminals, which are a full-size computer built into the vehicle. Depending on your status and availability, you get audible alarms go off, and immediately that job comes up with the details. So it's like a giant navman screen. You just touch the screen to accept the job, you confirm that by radio, and it, like any navman, will give you the quickest route to the job. So that's the sort of response we've got, and that's, and I'm not beating the ACT drum here particularly, but we've got, as well with that, we've got some really good advantages. Because we're a small jurisdiction, you know, we haven't got a massive fleet compared to other places, so we've got some really good technological aids that put us ahead. Yeah, our ComSend, if it's a silent number, our ComSend can still access it. There are very few numbers that they can't access. There are some cases of silent numbers that can't be accessed where the owners of those numbers have actually sent what we call site-specific information in. So once they give the address, lots of information comes up. So particularly with the ambulance service for people with either severe difficulties, you know, transportation problems, or people with certain extreme health conditions, there'll be site-specific information recorded against them. So as soon as that address gets recorded, lots of vital information for those responding crews actually comes up. So when they accept the job, that information comes up on the screen. So as they're actually making their way to the job, usually you've got, you know, drivers paying attention, and that the crew leader or crew member in the front will actually be reading this out. So they arrive on those premises pre-prepared. Same thing with bushfire or whatever. You know, they can push a lot of information out on the screen. In the Territory, there are certain premises that are loaded with asbestos or other health hazards. That information also appears on the screen. So for the safety of those crews, they've got a heads up and a warning to what's already happening. So a little bit of information about me. I've done a reverse sea change in 2010. I came up on a secondment to ACT Rural Fire Service from Bermagui, and my wife and I were thinking of moving at the time because all our kids had moved out and were having grandkids, and we thought, well, they're not annoying us anymore, we'll go and annoy them. And came up here, did a 6-month secondment, a job came up. I got a job and bought a house and rang my wife up and said, you better have a look at this house because I think it's pretty good. She came up. Luckily she liked it too, and we love living in Canberra, so we've been here for 8 years now. I used to be brigade captain and work with New South Wales Rural Fire Service down there, so a lot of experience down here, and really happy to be working in the ACT. So, will we push straight on to the bushfire survival plan which you have? Yell out if you've got any questions or anything slightly off track. I'm happy to take questions at the end, and seeing one of your speakers didn't show, just keep me, how long have I got now?
We'll push you off in about 10 to 30 minutes.
10 to 30 minutes. Right, okay, so I might be the speaker by the looks of it. Oh. Okay, so first off, do you all get the idea of what a bushfire survival plan is? So, is it just for people that live in the bush? What are your thoughts? So, don't all talk at once? No. We've got some prompters up the front, excellent. So, why not? We are? So I'll give you some examples. Like classic older people like myself are considered a family resource, you know, minding the grandkids. You know, my wife is half her time sort of doing voluntary daycare, and you've got lots of, here's the second speaker, excellent. So there are lots of cases where you might be travelling from here to Murrumbateman or Yass quite frequently, either for work or to look after grandkids or with other family members. So you're travelling through quite bushfire-prone areas there. So your travel plans and your family plans might be actually affected by bushfire, but also those family members if they're living on a remote property or whatever. So we encourage people to think about bushfire no matter what. In a little while, we'll actually get a really good information source, which is ACT ACMAP-I, which is the free ACT government GIS website up. Have any of you accessed that yet here? Okay. Yeah, two people. Really good, three really good source of information. There's a bushfire tab there. You can find out whether you live in a bushfire prone area, and there's lots of other good information there. So we might gallop through this. So this is looking at from the start, okay, from the actual hardware. So up the top you can see the four little, on the right hand side, four little icons: discuss, prepare, know, keep. So the first thing, discuss, that's discussing with your family where you all fit in. And it's a little bit of what I was talking about before when I'm saying it's not just about you. So, you know, you might be a couple living on the urban interface and you might think, okay, we'll make our plans, but that goes back to also discussing between you, like most people spend most of their time at work. They're likely to be at work or coming home from work when a bushfire might hit, or there might be bushfire alert. So you've also got to consider travelling, what you might or might not carry in your vehicle, how you communicate with your family, all those sorts of things there. So think of yourself, think of how you fit into the whole extended family unit and where the other vulnerable members of your family are. So prepare, okay. We're staying here then. So top one, discuss. We talked about that. There's the equipment checklist. So that's looking at, have you got the tools and hardware to actually defend your property? Then there are some, and the action checklist down there, it's saying what you ought to do. A lot of that's common sense stuff, but as we say, common sense isn't necessarily common to all. Then there's prepare. What do you physically do? And these are the classic things that you hear banged on every year. You know, trim, mow, remove, clear, prepare. And again, that's backing up some of those top items on the equipment checklist. The third step is really important, and there's a lot of misinformation about here, about information sources. Research has proven that for people to react to an emergency, and particularly with fires, they need three sources of information. So classically, they'll hear about it, a potential fire threat or bushfire somewhere from a friend or on the radio or whatever. What could you suggest might be the other couple of confirmations that they... Yes? We'll go into that in a sec. Yeah, but is somebody going to text you all the time? Yeah, depending on the level of threat. So we'll talk about that in a sec. So you're somewhere and you see a big column of smoke. So you've got one confirmation there, haven't you, of something happening. What classically would people do then to get another couple of triggers before action? Radio, yeah. Oops. Social media is a huge one there. Or talk, or what's another suggestion? Yeah, people often ring a friend or a family member and say, I've seen this, do you know anything about that? And often that's an older person ringing a younger person who then will instantly be on Facebook, and on it goes. So if you don't do social media, get friendly with somebody that does, because, and it's a really good relationship often. It can be somebody quite distant from the fire. We've had people ring up from overseas asking about potential fire threat, and they're monitoring fire's progress via internet overseas for elderly residents or whatever, which is a great system. But of course we say you can't depend on ringing us up. You've got to follow the feeds. So you can see down the bottom here are your three. Getting back to your question, your three incident advice levels. Where are you going to find those sort of information? See the three icons: advice, watch and act, and emergency warning, down in that bottom corner. Excellent.
The ESA website.
Yes. Yes. So have any others of you been to the ESA website? No? So great. So we talk about one point of truth in the ACT as far as that goes. Now there are a couple of essential apps you can get on your mobile phone. Does anybody know what that might be?
I don't know what it's called. My partner he's a very health and safety officer, so he has this app that actually indicates where all the fires are going to happen in the area, and might give boosts.
Great. Fires near me. Yeah, that's the one. It's a free app, and it's listed there. So you can see your key information. Step 4, exactly what we're talking about. So we've discussed what happens when you call 000. There's the ESA website, the Fires Near Me app. Now local radio these days and Canberra's pretty good, but sometimes there's a time lag with local radios before it develops into something that's either newsworthy or if they know about it, isn't there? And my own feeling is that social media is often running ahead of that, and that local radio, ABC, whoever, are actually monitoring social media for some of their stories. So if you've got somebody monitoring social media and you're not, that's again a tremendous advantage there. You can see on the back, you get down to some of the detail here of what, who, where and when. So that's pretty self-explanatory. How am I going for time?
Good.
Does that mean another hour or does that mean 10 minutes?
10 minutes, easy.
Excellent. Is this the sort of thing you wanted to hear? So we discussed before, I'll go off camera for a sec, I'll consult my bushfire alert levels. Okay, so down in the bottom corner here, we've got our classic fire danger rating sort of meter or whatever you call it. The paper version of the electronic meters that we installed recently on the side of the main road. Do you understand what that meter, what that fire danger rating sort of half pi is telling you?
Who keeps the one on Madura Parkway up to date?
So they're all updated via an automatic feed from New South Wales RFS Sydney, which is fed by the data from the Bureau of Meteorology. So it updates every night at midnight. We can change that with a phone app, computer, and we can add the messaging to that via an app. Was that just a question, or was that a...
Well, there was an instance a couple of months ago now that it didn't read what it was supposed to read. So it read something different.
Okay, right. You can always contact either RFS or ESA just to, if your things aren't... No, it's all electronic. We can actually get on and see what they're all displaying, but of course we might not know they will trigger with faults, and we have had some battery stolen and things from them, believe it or not, but generally they won't, if something's reading not right or whatever, they won't trigger a fault, so feel free to give us a message. So what that's actually showing, like fires can be quite damaging and dangerous even at the lower levels, but as you work around that scale, severe and extreme before catastrophic, fires can be very difficult to control under those conditions. So what that's doing is people that either do dodgy things, and this can be tradesmen working outside, cutting, welding or whatever. There might not be a total fire ban when those activities are actually prohibited, but it's giving them a clue saying the fire danger rating's actually climbing here, so maybe you need to modify your activities to suit the fire danger rating. The other thing is with rural people, we'll actually discourage slashing operations, those sort of things, where they might actually make a spark by hitting a rock and start to get fire running on their properties, you know, at anything above high on there. It's just too great a risk. They might end up burning out their precious feed stores for their property. So do you reckon that's any value? Is it worth? Yep. Don't hesitate to contact us for more information. I just thought that was a good way of sort of working through the process with you. So can we get... Yeah, sorry. Okay. So are we going to... So the question is, are we going to notify you of an incident automatically? No. So the trouble is we're almost a bit of a victim of our own success with... so the system that generates text to phones, and in extreme cases the EWIS warnings to phones, is called emergency alert. What that is triggered by, when you see the actual alert levels down the bottom corner here, so you've got advice, so that's basically giving you background knowledge, watch and act, and emergency warning. But how this ties into your emergency plan is, this is saying that if you've got factors that mean that you need to take action at the advice stage or the watch and act stage, and these might be things like you might have somebody that's got mobility issues, or might have health issues that means they can't be exposed to even sort of background or ambient smoke. You might have to take action as a family at that advice stage, because you know, the warning might be about smoke or whatever. They might not be able to handle smoke. So you might be actually relocating or closing up the home and changing your aircon to recycle at that advice stage. So it really then looks as what are your family sensitivities and vulnerabilities on your plan, and how much time you need to prepare or take that action, and then what the trigger is. So when you move down the alert levels again, that watch and act, so defined as heightened level of threat, conditions are changing, start taking action to protect you and your family. So at that stage, it's saying that's the stage where if your plan is to not be there, so to relocate yourself, and this is voluntarily as a family unit or as an individual, then that's when you need to start really thinking about that, and you should have prepared the other stuff. So that's when you're actually doing that. Then the emergency warning is tied to an emergency alert. So physically, just to give you an idea, if there's a fast-moving incident that, and particularly with grass fires, which are wind-driven, a grass fire will move almost at the speed of the wind. They don't spot, but they're wind-driven. So you could get, say, West Dunlop, Parkwood, those sort of areas, and we had one a couple of years ago. Fire started under very windy conditions. It could be almost into West Dunlop before you realised it. So in those cases, to actually get the incident response going, to get incident management team going, and to get somebody ready to go on an emergency alert message would be very difficult. It takes a little while to, so the physical process is that somebody actually gets on a special computer, they work out the actual area under threat, they physically draw a polygon on the map, and they then have to consider how many phones, so the system's via a Telstra system, which then gives you the number of actually recipients, whether you're sending it to just mobiles or landlines, and there are other complex things. Then you've actually got to consider what you put in the message itself. And you do two messages. One of them is actually a phonetic version of that message, which is done for the audible messaging for the landlines. So it'll be sent out as a text message, and that's where a few years ago, those of you that might remember, there was a lot of criticism about the spelling of text messages sent for the Mitchell hazmat fire at the time. What that was somebody just didn't convert a few of the characters from the phonetic messaging to the text messaging. And all of that, of course, is under great pressure when an incident controller and other people are leaning over the shoulder just screaming at this person, get the message out, I don't care what it does. So it's a balancing act between not panicking too many people, alerting the right number of people, and the actual messaging process. You've got to balance the number of recipients because it takes time to work through that list from start to finish. So if you can actually be resilient yourself, make a plan, be prepared, keep in touch, and not depend on an emergency alert, you're miles ahead. If you get one, it's a bonus, but unfortunately now people think that they will be sent a SMS or an actual voice record call for any emergency. It'll happen best practice, but what we're saying is take responsibility, be resilient yourself, discuss your plans, work with your community and your neighbours, and keep it tight so that when something happens, hopefully those 3 bits of confirmation you want is somebody seeing something, confirming via reliable media / social media, and then you're actually going to follow you in. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, yep. Oh, fantastic. So, woohoo! You'd be talking about the Mulungari grasslands around Gungahlin? Yep. So they're actually managed in the ACT, the Emergencies Act calls for a bushfire operations plan from agencies and landholders within the rural area. So those grasslands come under, the EPSDD bushfire operations plan, which is authorised by the ACT Commissioner. I actually audit the bushfire management of those grasslands. So they're actually burnt both for bushfire management, in this case grassfire management, and for ecological management of those areas. There are golden sun moths, I don't think you get grassland eelers dragon, there's the pink wormtail lizard, those sorts of things in there. So complex management are there, but they're actually audited by me personally, and that's reported back to government. It's actually one of the RFS performance measures, the auditing of those bushfire operations plans. So quite well managed, and that goes for the large hazard reduction burns right out into the Brindabellas and surrounding. So does that make sense?
So all those dark areas there are.
Oh no, so this.
Explain what we're seeing here.
Okay, so this is the on ACMAPI. This is the bushfire prone area map. So you can see that what it's actually identifying is the bushfire prone vegetation, and also the what we'd call so this is these are your suburbs here. So this is bushfire or grass fire hazard, and then this is the buffer area, which in this case is I think about 300 metres in there. So that's saying that this hazard may affect this with either direct contact, which is very unlikely here, or ember hazard in those areas. So you can actually go on to ACMAPI, and you can see the URL up on the top, and they've revamped the website. There's fantastic, for a community group like yourself, there's fantastic information up there, all sorts of information, historical data, there's development stuff you can access if you want to view development applications around the place. Oh, great, here we go. Aerial images is a fantastic one to work to. The historic plans is a really good things. Significant heritage items that can be registered trees, all those sorts of things. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Look at that, asbestos response, Canberra tracks for walking tracks. So there's all sorts of information up there. Did that answer your question as far as the text messaging goes?
Well, the reason why I brought it up is that we have this young demographic in Gungahlin. Just kind of felt that people in Gungahlin might just think that technology is going to automatically tell them. Because they may not watch normal TV and they may not watch, normal TV and they might not listen to the radio and they might not be paying attention. And so they might think that maybe the text message is going to come through and tell them when there's something that they need to.
It's a really good question. In Victoria in 2009, when there was that terrible fire situation in Victoria, people had closed their house, tell people, keep out of the heat, keep safe, keep out of the heat. So they'd actually closed their houses up and were watching videos and things and didn't actually realise that there was such a serious situation coming on. It was actually a real shock to some people because from the start of the day, they had the aircon going, they had thick curtains on, and they were, relaxing as a family, de-stressed out of the heat. So it's a balancing act there, and I suppose that's where your networking and your family contacts and friends come in. I mean, lots of people, getting back to your question there, stream via their phone as well, so they might not even have their mobile on them. They might be actually just, Bluetoothing it through or doing whatever. So I suppose that's where we've got to, it's about building that sort of self-reliance as well. If you know somebody that you think is really not possibly at risk and not reacting to that, I suppose that's where as a community we've just got to say to people, hey, like the weather's looking dodgy, let's talk about it. And I suppose that's really the only way. I don't know how, I'm quite conscious of driving out of my driveway this morning. I slowed down and I stopped just at the end of my driveway, and a woman walking, doing a really healthy walk in the morning, just didn't even know I was there, walking through with her earbuds in. And she didn't, she wasn't a teenager, she wasn't any of the generation, she was a little bit younger than me, but her healthy pastime could have killed her if I wasn't watching, or I could have killed her. So yeah, I suppose we've just got to open up, look at what's around us, and act accordingly.
I've got this. You guys got an aircraft recently, is that right? Water bombing aircraft?
So we've set up at Canberra Airport for the first time a batching plant to refill air tankers. So fixed wing aircraft can vary from what we call single engined air tankers, which are basically a sort of a crop duster size aircraft, which can hold a couple of tonnes of retardant or water, up to the 737 that you might have seen on the news, which is a fantastic piece of hardware. The batching plant can actually, we can load water, we can load fire retardant gel, we can load fire retardant, which comes as the classic orange powder you see coming out in California recently, or foam. So that's to the large air tankers, which are classically the Hercules transports, the C-27s or whatever, that C-17 size aircraft, or the 737, which can carry, I think it's about 12 tonnes of water, foam or whatever. The great thing is that they're a fantastic machine to use, particularly where you've got those hard-running urban interface fires, used very successfully. We have used the large air tankers here, even on remote fires in the Madgy National Park over the last few years. Really successful. Very costly, but you've got to weigh up, and when people talk about the cost of these machines, you've got to weigh up cost of that in using as one of the tools for very large incidents or potentially large incidents versus protracted incident, big cost to environment, big cost to emergency service for wages, and also community safety. So it's a balancing act. They're all, some of the tools that we use. Now, if people don't see helicopters on fires, they think we're not taking it seriously. They're a tool, when they're available. In the Territory this year, we've got 2 aircraft on standby, 2 rotary aircraft on standby at our Hume Heli base. One of those has got a significant development as far as technology goes, which is it's called the situational awareness camera, very, very high definition camera. So the idea is it's a light helicopter that normally our air attack supervisor and air observer will go out in. They'll take good vision of the fire. That can be immediately streamed back to headquarters and viewed on all sorts of devices so that we know what we're looking at. That helicopter can then land, buck. It can actually put observers down, work the fire, and another medium helicopter which can insert what we call our remote area fire crews and bucket from much larger bucket or a belly tank. So they can actually hover over a dam, suck via a big snorkel and actually drop. So they can either use a bucket or that. And we've got the whatever resources are available from New South Wales RFS, we've got a very tight arrangement with their state air desk, so we can just source additional fires, which was what was happening on the Pierces Creek fire. So does that sort of give you an idea of the overall? How am I going for time? Is that? Okay. So any other questions? Yep.
Thank you very much, firstly, for the work you guys do. Very much appreciated. So the recent fire that we had in the south, which was very close to Canberra and those kind of things. So what initiated the fire and what happened to the investigation?
So I can't. Well, naturally, I haven't got the information on the investigation. That's actually a police investigation. That's AFP is continuing on that. I can tell you that the fire was ignited by an abandoned, burnt-out vehicle, or a vehicle that had been abandoned and burnt out. So that's what actually started. This is the Pierces Creek fire, I'm assuming, the one you were talking about? Yeah. The fire was a great success to actually keep it so distant from Canberra. It was about 8 kilometres from Canberra. It had so it ended up in almost like a bowl-shaped valley where we were experiencing really strange fire behaviour compared to fire weather predictions around there. So we had some quite interesting fire behaviour. It was almost burning within a bowl of a valley. Those of you that might know the Tidbit-Billow Deep Space Tracking Centre, it was across Paddy's River Road to the west of that. So, but quite challenging terrain, access difficulties, those sorts of things. And I suppose we had, the interesting thing about that fire was, for most people it was just a big plume of smoke, but for those people living from around Chapman down to probably Tuggeranong, they had a little break in the Bullen Range. They could actually see runs of fire cresting the ridge. The other people in Canberra, the fire was sort of shielded by Bullen Range. So for those people around Chapman, down to Canberra and Tuggeranong, the fire actually looked a lot closer than it actually was. So it was 8 kilometres away. We were taking it very, very seriously. If it did spot across Paddy's River Road and onto the Bullen Range, it would have been a whole different game. And there were quite detailed plans on fallback lines and contingencies and, plan A, B, C, D, more resources, all that sort of thing. But for those people, it was much, much more of a threat. And there was a lot of action around horse relocation and all sorts of community planning if it did break out.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, look, I'm like everyone else. We sort of look at these fires and we sort of just assume that someone is looking after it, and it's good to see what someone looks like. So thanks for coming along tonight and telling us a little bit of what the RFS does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you haven't grabbed the little brochure, make sure you do so. No doubt you can get these from ACT shop fronts, and if you want that checklist, and of course it's available online as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you. But happy to, thanks. But happy to, if people have further questions or whatever, or if you want another session, happy to come back anytime.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you.
Great.
Well, hopefully we'll have no worries with bushfires up north.
Excellent.
As we usually do, As we usually do, we want to ask members, MLAs, elected to come on a regular basis and talk to us about what they're either doing in government or doing in opposition. And
Good, thanks, sir.
Silver Gals to co with us is obviously not only the Liberal members of MLAs for Yerravik, but also the Leader of the Opposition. So, Alistair, welcome, and please come to the stage. What's going on from your side of the
Yeah, good. Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much, Peter, and your team for all the work that you do. It's great to have Leanne here, the Federal Liberal candidate for Fenner. And of course to the committee, thank you very much for what you do in promoting community in Gungahlin and also getting a lot of runs on the board with regard to the issues that you're fighting for. I also want to take my hat off to the RFS. To an extent, I think we're, there's so much complacency in Canberra because they do such a good job. There's this perhaps overconfidence about the actual real risks that we face, and that luxury that we've got such a professional RFS and emergency services in general is something that we shouldn't take for granted. Now, there's no shortage of things that I could talk about today, so what I'm proposing is just to rip through a number of issues and then take questions, because I imagine I'm far more likely to actually hit the nail on the head if I take questions as opposed to guessing what you want to hear. Now, of course, we're pretty much exactly halfway through the election cycle. I'm sure 4 years goes very quickly in government, but in opposition, it's slow going. It's very slow going. It's like prison time. Not that I've spent much time in prison, but I've spent a bit of time in opposition. And my 10-year sentence, I'm hoping, is coming to an end in a couple of years' time. But look, of course, everybody in Gungahlin is experiencing, I think, a real hit to their quality of life, particularly with regard to traffic. The impact is really quite significant. People are losing at least half an hour, perhaps 45 minutes a day of quality family time, either in the morning or in the evening, as a result of some of these roadworks that go on and on and on, and I think just a lack of overall master planning for the area. I'm also pretty worried about what's happening between the Sydney and Melbourne buildings in the city. It looks like they are going through with their plans to reduce it down to 2 lanes, which pretty much means that the congestion that you're currently experiencing for the 3 or 4 blocks right back to Hague Park is probably going to be a permanent fixture for Northbourne going forward. And again, that's something that really does affect Gungahlin residents enormously. Something else, of course, of particular concern is the rental market in the ACT and house prices. I think the situation in Throsby and Taylor is quite interesting. It seems that a number of blocks are starting to be handed back despite a small deposit being paid, which suggests that people are thinking twice about those particular blocks. Now, I don't want to be alarmist here and say that that they're all overvalued or anything like that, but I do want to highlight that I think there is a genuine affordability crisis in the rental space, but also, of course, in the land space. Really, I don't think we've got a housing affordability crisis in Canberra. I think we've got a land affordability crisis because the cost of construction actually hasn't gone up anywhere near as much as the cost of land. And that's evident by the fact that 15 years ago, or even less, maybe a dozen years ago, a house and land package was 25% land, 75% construction. Now it's more likely to be 60% land and 40% construction. And that, of course, demonstrates that land has gone up significantly faster than the cost of construction. And the reality is, I know people say we're running out of land. I don't buy it. I think there's plenty of land in Canberra. The master planning that was done by the NCA and the NCDC for decades still demonstrates there's a lot of land in Canberra, and the way that every estate is treated like it's going to be the last, I think is doing a real disservice to Canberrans. And that's why I think the risk of people moving over to New South Wales is real. I think the offering in Gugong and elsewhere is something that could be delivered here in the ACT. There is no reason why land 5 kilometres that way should be cheaper than land 5 kilometres that way. However, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's been creeping for a long time. Of course, the start date for light rail is still pending. We expect it'll be sometime in early April. That'll be operational. They have to do a lot of testing, and apparently they have to do a fair bit of testing in different climatic conditions as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether that involves needing to do testing in winter as well, and if so, whether they're going to be speed restricted for the first few months of operation. That's something that I gather is on the table. Of course, there's the drones trial taking place out here. I think that's a good thing. I think that drones have extraordinary potential, but they've got to be done properly. They weren't necessarily done properly in Bonython, but that's why you have trials. That's why you do these tests. And I think the idea of having a tradesperson round to your house and they need something, and rather than racing down to the Reece store or to Bunnings, to actually have that delivered straight away while the plumber's there, while the electrician's there, I think is pretty exciting. And there's a multitude of possible uses, in the health space, of course in the food space, and many other things. So I think it can work, but it's a matter of getting those flight paths right. It's a matter of making sure you've got the right technology so they're quieter than what they have been in the past. But I've got no doubt that all those can be resolved, but you need to do tests. I think we're fortunate to now have an ICAC being established. Come the 1st of July, the Integrity Commission will be operational. I understand they're going through, or they're commencing the recruitment process now for the staff that's going to be involved in that commission. The legislation went through on a fortnight ago tomorrow. I think it's pretty good legislation. It could be better. One of the concerns that I have is that there pretty much is a default of private hearings rather than a default of public hearings. The Canberra Liberals were keen to have the default as a public hearing and then to have a public interest test as to why it should be private. As it stands at the moment, it pretty much is the other way round, where the Commission has to justify why they're going to make one of the inquiries public. And I think that's not the way to go. Further to that, at the moment, the Public Accounts Committee is going through 3 inquiries. I'm no longer on that committee, but they're doing public hearings into, of course, the Dixon land swap. That was the $4 million purchase of the CFMEU headquarters off the tradies, and then the $1 a year leaseback for 42 months. There's also a live inquiry into the acquisition of rural leases, of which one of the questions actually relates to bushfires, and how is the ACT government now a massive landowner of once farms actually managing their purchases, because they are now the owner and the lessee of those products of those properties. And the other inquiry that relates to integrity is, of course, the Glebe Park deal, and that was where the ACT government purchased a $3.6 million block of land that had a valuation of $1 million at most. So they're all live, and I expect or hope that the Public Accounts Committee will be handing down those reports as soon as possible. There's also now an inquiry that the Public Accounts Committee has commenced into commercial rates in the ACT. The amount of money that businesses that either the property owners or tenants are paying really is extraordinary. The top marginal ratings factor for a residential property is 0.6%. So if you have a property that's worth $1 million, at that upper end, each additional dollar, you pay 0.6 cents in rates. So 0.6% for residential. In commercial, the top marginal ratings factor is 5%. It is absolutely massive. So when you have a top marginal ratings factor of 5%, they're pretty much paying stamp duty every year. You know, all this talk about abolishing stamp duty, well, they're paying it every year. They're paying 5% for the top marginal ratings factor. It's big money, and there's now an inquiry taking place into that because it's having a big impact. It's also interesting to note that the Commonwealth has now given instructions to all agencies to go into gross rental agreements, meaning that no longer can the landlord just pass on the outgoings as being in addition to the rent, because the Commonwealth is sick of paying massive amounts of rates, especially given when they signed up to some of these leases 7 or 8 years ago, it was a low marginal ratings factor, and now it's a very high marginal ratings factor. Further to that, with regard to commercial rates, there's two components. There's the valuation, and then you've got the multiplier. The multiplier is the 5%. The valuations are now being targeted by the Revenue Office as well. So I know of one, for instance, in Phillip, the valuation 1 year, $900,000, got revalued to $2.8 million. No lease variation. The Revenue Office just said, or the Valuation Office just said that they were on a good wicket for too long, and now it's worth $2.8 million. At 5%, that owner pays an extra $100,000 a year because their property is now worth $2 million more. So it's massive. There's another one on North One Avenue. Valuation was $5.7 million. It's now been revalued to $23 million. So over a $1 million increase per year on the rates for that property. It's very, very significant. And if you were to go on to All Homes and look at commercial properties a few years ago in Queanbeyan, you would have seen a very long list. You go into All Homes now and look for a commercial property to lease in Queanbeyan, and you're hard pressed to find one. And that's just a reality, that it's much easier for some people to operate out of Queanbeyan rather than here in the ACT. So we've got to be very careful about the long-term impact of all this. Of course, out here, there is the planning refresh taking place. I don't have a problem with tall buildings. I think there is a place for tall buildings. I think there's a place for apartment buildings. And I think the town centres is actually where they should be. I've got a problem when you have these apartment buildings seemingly in the middle of nowhere and not near services, not near doctors, not near schools, really just in the middle of nowhere. However, it's got to be done consistently, and that's obviously something that's not been consistent with regard to the height limits here in Gungahlin, where there are some very obvious anomalies that are not consistent with what has now been proposed. We shouldn't, I think, just compound the problem by just saying, well, to be consistent with a bad decision in the past, we should just keep on going down that path. I do think we need to make sure that we do a reset and get the levels right. But it's just a shame that it's come at the expense of proper planning policy in the past as well. Of course, the Gold Creek issue, which is known to many of you with regard to the redevelopment of the back 9 of the golf course, seemed off the table. The Labor Party has committed to not supporting residential, or the residential that was proposed by the golf course owner. They bought a golf course, and I think they should have to run a golf course. That's the lease that they purchased. And if that doesn't work for them, then I think they should be looking to hand the golf course onto somebody else that does want to run a golf course. Finally, just some news that I just heard today. The Takwa school that is being established out in Moncrief, they've just received a block grant for the first capital component of their construction. I think they've been granted $1.2 million by the Block Grants Authority. So they expect to be operational at their Moncrief site, I think by late next year. And the reason it's late next year is because they're planning to use modular buildings in the first instance. Anyway, look, that's a run through some of the issues. Of course, there's a million others in Gungahlin and across Canberra. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thanks, Peter.
All right. Any questions? Oh no.
We had the planning refresh, and so we had some planning people from the ACT. We had some planning people from the ACT government at our last meeting, and one of the things that they showed us was that there's going to be a reduction in the amount of business zoned sort of areas in the new releases in Gungahlin. And one of the questions that I asked them was that, because they said we're going to halve the amount of space. I think it was from 200,000 to 100,000 for dedicated businesses, and that concerns me a fair bit because apparently it was double that before. So it's been halved once and it's been halved again. And what they've said is that basically no businesses are interested in sort of moving in there, so we've decided to halve it. And when I've asked them what the evidence is for that, there doesn't seem to be any evidence sort of put forward for that. It's just we've decided to halve it again. So that concerns me in the sense that Gungahlin, I feel that the CBD itself is going to be limited in its ability to expand if you don't have business zones that are maintained. The reason why you have them listed as being businesses. So I guess what I'm curious about is whether or not in the Assembly, whether there's any answer to that question in regards to the reasons as to why those business zones have been slashed in Gungahlin in the new areas that are due to be released.
Look, no, I don't. I don't know what the rationale is, other than pretty much what you said, that they don't think there's going to be demand. I think the best way to ensure there's not going to be any demand is to pretty much limit the supply, and therefore you cap out what's possible, or you max out what's possible. All the evidence suggests that you reduce congestion, you improve quality of life, and pretty much every other indicator when you have people working close to where they live. And if we're going to keep putting more people in Gungahlin, so that's pretty much the proposal. The proposal is to remove commercial and put in more residential. That actually compounds it in both directions. You have fewer internal trips and more external trips, which pretty much means that it becomes more of a dormitory district than it might otherwise be. So I think there's got to be provision for more commercial, and again that's going to require some decisions from the Commonwealth as well, but also the ACT government about where they're located. It will also help with the viability of light rail to have some contraflow happening as well. But really, it's debatable whether we've got a territory plan in the ACT, because I reckon we've just got a point-in-time document. It's not actually the plan for the future of the city. It seems that everything in the territory plan is negotiable, which is not what a plan should be. Yes, you might have some around the margins. You might have some changes, but it just seems that everything is up in arms, and that is quite a contradiction, or quite different to how Canberra was planned for decades.
I'll grab a follow-up question on that, Alistair. I agree that. Okay. So I'll challenge you on one thing. I think there's been a lot of planning, and whether it's good or bad is a good discussion. What I think has really fallen off in the last 5 years to a decade is the enforcement of planning rules, and you talked about the way that's happened. I think there's something of a crisis of confidence around a lot of the community councils around the fact that developers seem to be able to get away with more and more and more and more. So I'd be really interested in knowing what the opposition's plan to fix that, to put a bit of backbone and spine back into not so much the planning side of it, but at the execution of the rules, the application of the constraints.
Well, I think it's several-fold. It seems that the default response for everything in the ACT is throw another regulation, throw more rules at the problem, and that'll fix it. And generally, I think what happens is that you end up targeting the compliant people, and the rogues keep on being rogue. You know, the 99% or 95% of people that do the right thing are then further restricted, and the 5% of people that you're supposedly trying to target will keep on doing what they've always done. The real issue is, as Peter mentioned, is enforcement. I think that if you actually just simply enforced the building code, let alone the territory plan, just the building code, you're going to get much better outcomes in the ACT. And then even if you simplified the territory plan and made it very easy to know where you stand and what is actually possible on that site, or what is actually possible next to a neighbour's block, I think you're actually going to have a far more transparent culture if everybody knows what the rules are. And there are some jurisdictions that do this very well. And there are some apps that some councils have that make it very easy to know what could happen where. And when you have it nice and simply done like that, I think you actually get this citizen enforcement of rules as well, not just a big stick from a planning authority. But look, definitely I really do feel sorry for the DA assessors at the planning directorate. I mean, there are so few of them, and they're flat out. They've now got a new system where they seem to not give out telephone numbers, so you actually can't call up and chat with your DA assessor and ask them what the issues are. So, and that's because they're flat out. So there's all sorts of issues, but I think it comes down to enforcement rather than more regulations or more rules.
All right, Kevin.
Following up on that, Molongo, on the plans that we've just been released last Monday or the Monday before, have 375, it's planned to have 375 jobs in Molongo for an area of 50,000 people. Now, clearly what's happening is that we're going into this centralisation mode, and it seems to be an unstated thing, but clearly Canberra is being turned into a central district with satellite dormitory suburbs. And does the Liberal Party agree with that approach? And if not, how are you going to try and stop the rot?
Yeah, look, I firmly believe that Canberra's at its best when our town centres are flourishing. And part of that means town centres should be town centres and suburbs should be suburbs. And at the moment, we've got town centres trying to become suburbs, and we've got suburbs trying to become town centres, it seems, just in terms of the development and just the mixes that we're getting. So I don't think that everything needs to be centralised in the city. I think that's a misstep, and I just don't think it can work. You know, Tuggeranong's not going anywhere. You know, Gungahlin not going anywhere. You know, we need them to work and we need them to function as they were planned to. And especially Gungahlin, it's not like we're talking about something that was planned 100 years ago. You know, this is a modern planning construction. So it should be able to work as it was intended. You know, the people that designed Gungahlin, you know, they're still around. You know, there are people who are still working in the agencies that have been intimately involved for decades in the planning of the city. The least variation charge is a real problem in the town centres, and that's why to the last election we did take a policy of a removal of that charge in the town centres, at least for a period, because you know there are so many sites right across the city in town centres that are ripe for development. And if you do a complex that has, you know, 100 apartments, or it's got commercial space or whatever, you then take the pressure off the suburbs as well. Now, I don't think those apartments should be at the expense of standalone blocks, because I think there is a social need for standalone blocks as well. But I firmly believe that suburbs should be for standalone blocks and, where possible, units, villas or townhouses, and then with the concentration of the apartments in the town centres, but with commercial as well.
So how would you propose, say
Well,
how would you go about it?
Well, several things you can do. Firstly, you can actually reinstate the planning hierarchy that Canberra's had for a long time, which is meant to be high in the town centres, and then it goes down in a pretty fast crescendo. And so you allow the suburbs to be suburbs, and therefore, where you have new apartment growth, you do have apartment growth in town centres. That's what I firmly think is the right thing to happen. The lease variation charge, as I said, is definitely an inhibitor to getting developments done in the city. We're talking millions of dollars for some developments. $30,000-$40,000 per apartment to construct is the tax. It's just massive, and that makes a lot of these deals, a lot of these projects unviable. And then, of course, it's through the land release program. It's releasing land for commercial. It's not putting every single development up and down Northbourne Avenue. This proposal that that everybody should live on the route. Well, better than living on the route is living at the destination. Yet it just seems that for some reason, you've got surface car parks in the city, yet you're flogging land kilometres away for apartment complexes of 300. Nowhere else in the world will that happen. It's just so artificial. And it means that someone who does buy an apartment 3 kilometres away potentially gets gazumped when they do release that block in the city 10 or 15 years later. So it's just got to be done in a far more strategic way, and I just don't think that's happening at the moment. I just think everything is ad hoc.
So would you, hang on. Sorry. We might go to another question and come back to that. So,
Hey, thanks, Alistair, for coming down. I can see recently the bus fare is going up, rates have gone up, electricity bill gone up, water bill gone up. So everything is going up. And also I can see they're ripping off the newly built roads like Hotspot 1, which connected the Bona and then the Moncrief Taylor area. So all the, they're ripping off the road that was built like 3 years back to get the dual one. And again, we're not completing the Hotspot till the end. We're going to stop there and probably in another 1 year time probably rip off everything and then do it till there. But spending money on these ones and increasing tax, and also I found we color the roads, we change the lights, we color the bus, and we get money to do that. So I'm just struggling to understand, is there money management is gone wrong, or what's going on? Why it's all happening? Like why the price all going up, and why there's such a waste of money for the things we don't need to. And I also found there's a priorities with the drugs. Some of the drugs are going to be legalized now, and then the ACT have a biggest problem with the drugs as well. So I'm not sure, what's what you guys think about all this one, and what's the solution that you're going to propose, when you guys are going to come into power.
Well, I firmly believe that the vast majority of people aren't looking for the ACT government to save the world. I think they're looking for bread and butter services to be delivered. Be it health, be it education, be it street sweeping, be it road maintenance, be it footpaths, be it, all the things that traditionally have made Canberra great. And with regard to rates, they are significant, and they're becoming more significant. But there are two questions. The first question is, can people afford it? And the reality is that for many Canberrans, they can. Anywhere else in the country, rates go up by 10%. The mayor gets tossed out in a flash. Here, a lot of people do shrug their shoulders and say, "Well, it was $300. I can afford that." But there are a lot of people that can't. And yes, there are a lot of people that can, but there are a lot of people that can't. And I think it's pretty arrogant for those who can afford to pay for this to then put it on those who can't. And that's pretty much what we've had. But even those who can afford it, you then get to a second question, and that is, are you getting value for money? So one, can you afford it? If that's a no, well, there are problems for that household, and that's real. But if it's yes, they can afford it, then it's a question of, well, are you getting value for money? And in 2001, the ACT budget was $2 billion. In 2020, the ACT budget is $7 billion. Tripled, and then some. That is extraordinary. In that same time, whilst we're sort of forecasting it, 2 or 3 years here, inflation over that time will be about 60%. But this would have gone up 350%. So the revenue that the ACT government is getting really is extraordinary. And that's evident, of course, with the stamp duty that's still bringing the same amount as when it was abolished. The rates take is extraordinary, and then of course you've got the commercial rates issues as well. So I just think it's governments doing things in an ad hoc way. It seems they have pet projects that they go hell for leather on one particular issue, and you see it with the artist impressions that get released. It was all going to be about City Hill renewal about 10 years ago, and then that got thrown out. And then it was all going to be about a convention centre, and that got thrown out. Then it was all going to be about City to the Lake, and that got thrown out. Then it was going to be about light rail down Constitution Avenue. Now that's been thrown out. Then it was all about the casino, and that's been thrown out as well. It just seems that there is just ad hoc or just thought bubble after thought bubble, and every one of these has cost millions and millions of dollars, every single one. That's in addition to just all the other expenditure that happens right across the board. So I just think it needs just a reprioritisation, and we just need to take a fresh look at what is the role of the ACT government, what services do people value, what services do people need, and let's prioritise those. And then if you can afford to do some other extras, well, you can go and do that then. But don't do the extras first and then say you haven't got money for health and education.
Any other questions? Yep, at the back. I'll go for the lob.
Bit like Peter, thanks for coming. It's good that you point out all the problems, but I'd like to hear some solutions.
Yeah.
So in 12 months' time, come back, point out the problems, and tell us how you're going to fix them.
Yeah, look, and that's right. And look, if there's been a fault of us in the past, it has been that I think a lot of our policies have been very rational, been very logical, and I of course think they've been pretty good policies, and on a few occasions the government's copied them as well. But there's also that need for the bigger vision for the city as well, and we certainly see 2019 as the year for vision, the year for policy, because times are changing. The idea of just dumping election policies a month before the election and everybody's tuned in and picking up the paper and following things, it's just not like that. People are rightly living their own lives. They're happily going about their business, and it does take time for ideas and for policies to resonate. So happy to come back in less than 12 months.
Anything else from those gathered? Anything online, David?
Sorry.
You got another one?
I'm happy to hang around as well. If people want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
chat
no,
afterwards.
we'll have a chat. Yeah, sure.
Just follow up on my previous question about the drugs that I don't even know, but but what I found out was ACT already has the biggest drug problems, and my concern is, we're targeting the vulnerable community, and then it's going to eat, it's some of them really bad, and we don't, and then it's going to affect the health system and then policing, all kind of things. So, was the bill passed already on the?
No. The Labor Party's big on social policy, but you look at what's happened with rent, look at what's happened with rough sleeping and homelessness, look at what's happening with drug use, really, and then health and education as well. There's all sorts of issues here. That legislation has only been presented; it hasn't been voted on. We expect it'll come on in February or March. It seems there are quite a few holes in that legislation, and once again, I expect there to be pretty serious enforcement issues. Because when you say someone's got to have 4 plants, well, honestly, who's going to go door to door checking whether it's 4 plants or 6 plants or 8 plants? Who's going to say there's how many people living in this house, and does that correlate with the number of plants? Once again, it's having rules and regulations that, yes, some people might comply with, but the problematic people are not going to comply with it, and they can't be enforced. So you end up getting potentially the worst of both worlds with that sort of principle. With regard to the actual legislation, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to count to 13 in the Assembly, and I can't imagine that the 2 Greens are going to be voting against this legislation anytime soon. Labor and the Greens combined have 14; they need 13. So this legislation is getting up. We've got to look and see if there's any improvements that we can make to this legislation, given that it, in all likelihood, will get up. But I don't see this as a massive priority for Canberrans. But it's on the table, and they're going to ram it through. Yep.
It's back on Gungahlin and the planning and stuff like that. And really, I guess what I'm asking the Liberal Party is, what are the plans that the Liberal Party has for Gungahlin in the future? If we're getting a new federal government department, which is good. So Zed sort of has come through with that promise. But how can we turbocharge the local economy in Gungahlin, and what's really the view of the Liberal Party in order to really focus on Gungahlin? Because from my perspective, it appears the government appears to be heavily weighted towards the south in regards to a lot of decisions. Some things have gone our way lately, which is good, but from a planning perspective, nobody seems to have put forward a grand vision for Gungahlin as to what we can be in 10 years' time. And I just really want to know what the Liberals' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that. It feels that the South is getting everything. Of course, down south they say the absolute opposite, and it seems there are no winners unless you happen to live and work in the city. There has been a huge shortage of master planning, but when I say master planning, I'm not just talking about built form. I mean a master plan for living in Gungahlin, and what does that actually mean? And it just seems that every suburb's been ad hoc. Every suburb has got the wonderful last impressions. It all says it's going to be the most livable walking suburb, etc., etc. Well, every house has 2 garages still, So for all this talk that it's all going to be walkable, etc., etc. They haven't met their KPIs. So there does need to be an overall vision for Gungahlin, and that's got to be a guiding document that affects land release, affects planning, affects road use, affects the bus network, etc. And that's certainly something that we're mindful of and that we're beavering away on.
All right. Well, it may be that should the Liberals be successful in the next election, it may be all too late then. Most of the Gungahlin suburbs will be underway by then, but here's hoping from your point of view. Thank you, Alistair, for coming along. You've indicated you can be around to chat for a bit, so for those of us here, thank you for coming, and we'll take advantage of that, I think. Thank you very much. Just a reminder that this is our last meeting for the year. We won't be back in January because I suspect none of you will be either. And our next meeting is the second Wednesday of February 2019. Have a great break and Happy New Year. Cheers.